Who is this person who claimed in the 19th century to bring a new revelation from God? Why did he willingly undergo 40 years of hardship and deprivation to demonstrate the validity of his beliefs? Why have over 6 million people in 200 countries and some 127,000 localities chosen to become followers of Baha'u'llah?
Undergone a grueling traveling schedule. Yes. You are a charismatic speaker, but also you're an author. And during that time, you have written a wonderful book called Sacred Moments.
People were saying, I wish I could think about this every day for myself. So that's how Sacred Moments came about. That was the second book. A Pace of Grace came out of my health challenges. Then, my beloved brother John died. My little brother. The day that I found him weeping, I thought he was weeping because he realized this horrible tragedy. I'd been doing a lot of weeping, he hadn't. And when I found him weeping, I thought he's finally seen the light. This is a horrible thing happening. When I asked him, what are those tears? He said, it's so beautiful. And what he was referring to was that all morning he'd been reading the Baha'i writings, what Baha'u'llah said about what happens to us in the next world. He says, I have made death a messenger of joy unto thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve? And John took that to heart.
If you've just joined us, we are talking to Linda Kavelin-Popov, who's the founder of the Virtues Project. Linda, you were talking about the 5 strategies, and as we were discussing previously, but that each of your major models, which is the Virtues Project, the Pace of Grace, and now Graceful Endings, incorporates these 5 strategies. Could you tell us what they are?
I'd love to. And they apply to whether you're raising a child, you're looking at your own personal development, you're running a company, you're teaching a school, you're teaching in a school and you want the school to have a culture of kindness. And also it's when you're caring for the dying. So they really apply in all these ways. And basically what they consist of is the strategy 1 is to speak the language of virtues. And the key there is to come out of shaming people into naming their virtues. And you can use this language to acknowledge people, to thank them, to correct them, or ask for a change. You need to be kind. And in the case of working with the dying, it's a very powerful language for them to use, because one of the things they seem to feel the need for, I call it one of the 3 tasks of the dying, is to thank the people that have been meaningful to them, to thank their husband or their wife or their children, and to thank them, to say, this is what I see in you. So it's just as important at the end of life, too, to hear from those that love you and respect you, what they see in you. Whenever I would acknowledge John for a virtue, his eyes would just shine. And of course, he did the same for me and for Dan. So it's like one time we were driving in the car. I was driving and he wasn't, because he wasn't allowed to drive anymore. And this was a huge sacrifice for him because he loved his car. We always called him Mr. Toad because he loved automobiles. Boop, boop. And I asked him, I said, John, how are you able to have such serenity? So that's a virtue. He said, well, people keep asking me if I'm afraid or if I have hope. He said, for me, it's not about fear and it's not about hope. It's about trust. And later, when I was going through great suffering over his pain, he said, I have the pain, but you have the suffering. He says, you and your damn empathy, Linda. But he said, you need your vitamin T, Linda.
Vitamin T?
Trust. So the language is a way to think, a way to speak, a way to be, a way to act. Then there is recognizing teachable moments. And that is an attitude that we're all here to learn, that everything we do, everything that happens to us is a gift for our learning. Even the knowing and having a terminal diagnosis, being told we're going to die. We're all going to die, but we don't believe it. And then when it hits us that we're ill and it's happening, there are many, many lessons. And that's when many people want to do a life review. They look back over their life and they talk about what they regret and what they're happy about. And it's very helpful to ask questions like, what are you most grateful for? What were you proudest of? What are you proudest of in your life?
Helping
What's giving
them
you
to review.
joy? It helps them to do the review. But also the main thing that helps them is simply listening and letting them tell you their story. Whatever that story is. Some people's story is full of pain. They need someone to hear it. That was the meaning of my life. With John, it was full of joy. It was full of, he was incredibly grateful for his opportunities to be of service, particularly through his Baha'i service and his Virtues Project service. Then there is setting clear boundaries. And there are many boundaries you need to set with a child. To say, in our family, we use words, we don't use fists. When we're angry, we speak our anger and we ask the other person for understanding. So it's a whole, one of my boundaries is about preserving my energy at this stage of my life. And so, and especially when I was ill, I had new boundaries. I could do very little, and I had to save up my energy for the important things, and I couldn't talk on the phone. It exhausted me. Not sure why, but it just did. So I had boundaries that if you wanted to talk to me, I had a phone time between 1 and 2. That's it. Even my kids. So in the dying process, all these new issues come up. Who gets to spend time with the dying person? How long are they allowed to stay? Who does that person want to see? And how do you balance their needs and the needs of the people that love them? The other thing is, as things change, as people get closer to death, sometimes something happens where they don't want to eat. And some people want to shove food at them. It's like, I can't let him die. I can't stop nurturing him. I mean, someone in our family was losing her son, and she was horrified that he wasn't eating. That meant she was a bad mother to her. But he was letting go. And we have to respect those boundaries. John never got to that one, but that's okay. He ate heartily to the very end. So, there were, and the other thing is, often someone with a brain injury or brain cancer becomes enraged. All of a sudden and that happened twice with John, and I was the safe person, so I was the object. The first time it happened, I was like, that hurt. And I didn't say a word. I was just taken aback by it. It happened a second time when I simply made a suggestion to him, and he was very grateful for most of my help. And all of a sudden he said, I'll decide what I'm going to buy, and don't you tell me. Now that isn't his nature. That was not John. He never would talk to me like that. And I said, John, I hear you, and I respect your right to decide what you're going to shop for. And I said, you need to be kind when you talk to me. He went, oh, then I'm sorry. You were just trying to be helpful. It's just like he came to. And all you need to do is to say, please be kind. 2 children are fighting. Please be kind to each other, or tell each other what you need. So then the 4th strategy is called Honor the Spirit, and this was the heart of John's graceful ending. Because that was when we had our routine of reverence every day. And I tell every audience, it could be Korean business people, it could be villagers in the Cook Islands or in Fiji. I tell everybody needs a routine of reflection. You need time to commune with your deepest self and with your Creator, if that's part of your belief. But everybody, no matter what belief system, needs time to reflect and to really draw on the virtues. And so part of it for John, our routine of reverence was very, very important to him. He often said, this has been a slow miracle. I almost call the book Slow Miracle because he'd said it so often. He said, people think a miracle is like Cecil B. DeMille production, you know. He said, but for me, learning what I've learned, receiving what I've received as I get closer to the end has been such a gift. And he said the greatest gift is he calls them RPMs. That's my term for reading something that inspires you. And we always read from the sacred texts. Prayer, meditation, and service. And our way of serving when he couldn't do very much was actually to do a virtues pick from the virtues reflection cards. And I've mentioned them a lot in the book because people are finding them a tool to go dive deeper into spirituality. So shall I show you that?
I would love you to.
And then I'll close with the fifth strategy. Okay, so here are the cards, and they're everything from purposefulness, generosity, creativity, and so on.
And all of those are virtues in us.
Oh, yes. There's a lot more than 100.
We are so rich.
We are.
We don't realize that.
No, we have them all inside of us. And the way we bring them to light is to understand them and to act on them. And that's what polishes off those gems that are in our true selves. So, would you like a pick of virtue?
I would.
Now think of something that's on your mind, like just name an issue or...
Okay, do you want to pick it for me or do I put my hand
No,
up? Oh,
this is yours.
All right. Okay, I'll close my hand.
Now tell me something first. Tell me what's on your mind. You don't have to go into a long one, but just
No, I'm thinking of honoring the spirit because that's very important.
The need
to
to
me.
honor the spirit.
The need.
Okay.
Stop rushing around. Stop telling God you love him as you jump in the car. But actually...
Kiss and run.
Kiss and run. Yeah, but actually do it because it's for you. And it's very easy to tell other people to do it, but you're not doing it yourself. That's what I learned this weekend.
So let's see what virtue comes to you. Would you be able to read that? Or would you like me to read it for you?
I think I need glasses. Right. Oh, look at that. Well, it's so appropriate. Strength. Strength is the inner power to withstand whatever comes. It is our capacity to endure in the midst of tests. We grow in strength as we tackle life's challenges with courage and determination. We deepen in strength when we choose gentleness and practice patience. We stay strong when we recognize that suffering is a thread woven through the design of our lives, not to make us unhappy, but to transform us with grace. Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through the experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved. Helen Keller. I have the power to endure my tests. I willingly face the challenges of my life. I have the courage to persevere. I cultivate gentleness and patience. I understand the purpose of suffering. I trust the value of transformation. I am thankful for the gift of strength. It empowers my soul.
So how does
Linda.
that speak to your...
Directly. We've spent the whole last 30 minutes talking about discovering our strength through our virtues. And it even has pace there. And the fact that...
It has pace there.
It has pace. Thank you.
So how does this connect to your desire to have more reverence in your life and more of a pace of grace?
Well, to know that I've got the strength within me. to know that actually it is there. I mean, I know it's there, but I need to acknowledge it. I think that's the difference, that when you allow yourself the time for prayer and meditation, instead of skidding through and screaming on to the next thing, you actually start to acknowledge things, which makes everything in life more colourful.
And when someone is in that place of doing their life review, as John was, this practice, he said, this is the whipped cream inside the cake and the icing on the cake, because we would close with a virtues pick. And we would do what I'm going to do with you right now, which is, when you finish your pick, I'm going to acknowledge you for the virtues that I notice. I notice the joy in your eyes when you talk about more prayer, and I see the self-discipline of calling yourself to this practice that is going to enrich your life.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So then I would do the same, and what a way to start the day.
What a way to start the
And
day.
we spent sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 hours, because he needed to talk.
Yeah.
And then I went on to what's the fifth strategy, which was a big part of our sacred time, where I would offer him spiritual companioning. And that is a tool. It's really the heart of, I would say, of the Virtues Project, because it's when I listen to you, I'm listening you into your own clarity. I'm listening you into your own truth. And so sometimes it's in pure silence, just that receptive silence. You're doing it for me today so beautifully. I feel how present you are to me. And you are really that divine presence when you are so aware of me, and there's no judgment, there's no agenda to change the person. And when someone is dying, everybody's got an agenda. They want them to feel better. They don't want them to hurt. They don't want them to know that they're dying. I mean, it's just amazing the things that family let interfere with being present to their
For that
loved one.
person. Yeah.
So one day, for example, John said, you know, Lynn, I'm really straddling both worlds now. And I said, what does that mean to you, John? He said, I'm only half in this world and I'm half in the next. I said, you're on your way, aren't you? Because that's what he wanted, to be on his way. And he said, but I'm longing for a hand up. And I just listened to that. And then he went off to the living room after that was the end, and he went off to the living room. And he came back after a rest, and he said, you're going to think I'm nuts. Something just happened. And he meant something very sacred. And I said, I'm going to think you're nuts. He said, oh, it's you, right? And he said, I felt Dad come and put his hand on my shoulder and say, I'm going to help you come home. He said, there's your hand up, John. And the whole last night of his life, he's in a coma, but he's going like this. He's reaching up. So it's really being present to another person's true story. You're not trying to move them off of it. You're trying to help them get to the heart of the matter. And because whenever they empty their cup, which is the goal of companioning, whether it's a little kid who's just had an injury or it's a person who's dying, there's always that pearl of truth at the bottom of the cup. And that's what sets them free. The truth sets us free. So what I found, I mean, one of the jobs I had just before we started, well, actually, as we were beginning the Virtues Project, was I was the Spiritual Care Director at Hospice. And what a gift that was. Because they taught me that what they needed was not somebody to keep them happy, someone to keep them company. And that's where the word companioning came from. I told a woman that when she wanted to know what I was doing to her husband, because he was so mad at her and he was so happy when I was around. So I said, do you really want to know? Because she said, what are you doing to my husband? And I said, you really want to know? So I took her down into a little room and we sat, and she said, we're very happily married, meaning till you came along. And this was a young man. I mean, to me, he's very young. He was about 63. And he was just about to retire, and they were going to take the trip around the world. And what I noticed when I first met her was that he was roaring with anger, literally. And she was going, Jesus loves you, God loves you. And he's just, ugh. And so the first time I met them, I was asked by the nurses to go in the room. And so I introduced myself to both of them, and then I asked him a question, and she began to answer. And she wouldn't let me talk to him. And so I said, I think it might be helpful if I could just have a bit of time alone with him. Would that be all right with you? And she was furious with me. So she left the room, and she started playing the organ next door really loud. And I went over to the bed, and I said to him, he was still roaring. He was like, "Argh!" So I went over and I made the same sound. And I said, what's going on around here? And he just calmed right. I was like, oh, someone hears me. And I said, what's going on? And he goes, life or death, got any ideas? And I said, what's on your mind about that? I'm not going to answer that question. That's his question. Yeah. And he said, why do I have to die? Now, some people would just panic at that moment. Well, your number's up, or God wants you more than we need. People say the most stupid things, meaning well, And I said, what's it like having to die? He said, well, I'm bitter. I said, did you have other plans? And he started to laugh. He said, yeah. We were going to take our trip around the world, and I just was retiring. He was all the way back. He had been away with the fairies, because he couldn't stand the dissonance between what he was feeling and what she was saying. And, that ended up with him just smiling, going off to sleep. And basically, I ended up saying to him, is God a part of your beliefs? And he said, oh, yes. And I said, well, have you prayed your bitterness? And he says, can you do that? I said, I really believe you can. I said, I think God knows how you feel, but I think God would like to hear it from you. And he just had the hugest smile, and he went to sleep. And so this continued to happen, and that's why she came after me, because she didn't know how to be with him. Mm. And so I took her into this little room, and I said, what do you want to know? She said, why is he so mad at me all the time? We were so happy. And I started giving her this little lecture, right? Her cup is totally full, and I'm going, I'm trying to put something in it. And I said, he's on a roller coaster ride right now. He's going through all kinds of emotions. Some days he's mad, and some days he's sad, and some days he's happy. And you're up here trying to make him happy, and he's... Yeah. And she goes, oh, I have to keep him happy. And it occurred to me, Linda, listen to her now. She's here. Listen to her. So I did. I said, what bothers you about? She said, I can't have him being depressed. And I said, what's bothering you about the idea of his being depressed? And she said, oh, I was depressed once and I couldn't get out of it. And I don't want him to die like that. So I asked her more about that and what it was like. And that's when I said to her, she said, it's like being in this dark place and you can't get out. And I said, I need someone to cheer me up. And I said, forgive me, but I don't think you needed that. I think you needed someone to come and be with you in the dark and light a candle so you could see what was going on and not be alone with it. And she goes, oh, is that what you do? I said, that's what I'm trying to do. She said, but I want him to be happy. I said, I know you do. You really love him, don't you? She said, I do. I said, well, you can't keep him happy, but you can keep him company. And that's how it started. and I began to teach her a bit about companioning. And she went back and she got it. And he was able to die in her arms. And as he was dying, she got up. This was at home. He didn't have to stay at hospice anymore. He went home to die. She knew how to be with him. I just visited them once to see, and it was just, they were like lovers again. And the day that he died, she played the organ for him. He had ordered a new organ for her birthday, and she played and sang to him as he was dying. So I thought, I have to teach this to other people. And that's always how he's been. When I've discovered something, I need to share it with others. So those are the 5 strategies: the language, the teachable moments, the boundaries, honoring the spirit, which is in all of them, and spiritual companioning. So it's really something to apply to every part of life, including to ourselves. I mean, I just saw you doing that, Alona. You were just companioning yourself about, what do I really need? Do I need to rush around? No, I need that sacred time, that sacred space.
Linda, all your years of experience and your darling brother turned the key for you to write this wonderful book, Graceful.
He did. Thank you for that.
And he sits there with you, and I know as that book goes out and helps people all around the world, because we are all going to die at some time or other. And I'm sure hospice volunteers will just love to read your book, because we've forgotten the basic reasons for our life and death, haven't we? And we fill them with rituals and fear. And I thank you so much for being with us on Baha'i On Air today.
Thank you.
I have made death a messenger of joy to thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve? And I made the light to shed on thee its splendor. Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom? Why dost thou veil thyself? Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom? Why dost thou veil thyself?